beautiful souls. It's Robin, and you're listening to the Live Life Balance podcast. I'm so excited that you dropped by today, prioritizing you and your wellness. This podcast is for my empty nester mamas, women who are getting close to this new chapter, who have dipped one toe in, or who are fully embracing this new phase. This is for the mamas who are ready to take back their health, to live their best lives. If you're looking for an authentic, supportive community, you're definitely in the right place. It's a space for us to learn how to prioritize ourselves again. I'll be your guide, pointing you to ideas and tools that you can experiment with to see what feels good for you. You'll also hear guests talking about their journeys and what's worked for them. Together, we're going to learn how to use the 1% shift method to create little shifts and habits that, who knows, maybe become your non-negotiables to feel your best. By feeling our best, we can show up in our purpose and live the most joyful life, even in the challenging times. And boy, this new chapter can seem challenging, but I can assure you we're not alone. Some of the topics we're going to talk about are self-love, self-care, nutrition, daily toxins, food swaps, mindset, and reframing our thoughts. I hope you leave each time feeling a little more empowered and at ease to take a step or two that will allow you to shine. Are you ready? If you said yes, take a nice deep breath and say, I am ready. Now let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to today's episode. I am thrilled to be here having this authentic conversation with Michelle Adams. She's a lawyer, a writer, a creator of a podcast called Harvesting the Truth, the Story of Our Food. It will be out in, I think, November. She was a medical litigator for 20 years before finding her true purpose as a good food and wellness advocate. Finding a voice for all of her ideas and passions has led her through the world of food entrepreneurship, blog writing, and now podcasting. She focuses on discovering information that will help others with mindful eating for a healthier life and for a more sustainable world. She's a mom and a dog mom with a passion for cooking and gardening. Y'all, this conversation was amazing. We went over so many great takeaways, very simple, easy takeaways that I know you guys are going to love and that you'll start implementing into your journey for your health and wellness just as soon as you can. So let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to today's episode. I'm super excited to have Michelle on. And so we're just going to get right into the conversation. So welcome, Michelle. How are you today?
I'm great, Robin. How about yourself?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time today to come on. And I think that we're going to really give a lot of value to the audience through our discussion, especially just talking with you a little bit before the show started. So if you want to just give our listeners a little bit of background so they can become familiar and get to know you a little bit better before we kind of do some deep dives into some of the specialties that you have.
Sure. So, I actually was a medical litigator for 20 years. And I did that. I loved my job. I loved working. I represented a lot of doctors and hospitals and clinics, and I always loved the medicine part. And then I started to get really interested in food. I'm not unfamiliar with cooking and baking and that type of thing. That's how I was raised. I was raised in a small farming community. And we grew a lot of our own food, and my family was Italian, so food was love, and it was very important to us. And luckily was able to spend very a lot of very formative years with my grandparents, where they taught me how to grow food and how to make food, how to can your food. But sometime when I was practicing law, I started to get a little burnt out and feeling unhealthy, because I was focusing all of my efforts on my career and my family, my house, and I felt very unhealthy. And so I started to focus more on what I was eating, focus more on cooking from scratch, because I noticed that we had gotten away from that as we were, we did it when I was little, and then I went off to college, started raising a family, and all of a sudden, like, you're busy and you start buying everything that the store has to offer. And
Convenience.
exactly. And I fell into that. I bought
Sure.
whatever, like, the cereals and the waffles and the syrups and everything. And I realized that I wanted to get back to cooking and baking more. And I had never been a baker. We cooked a lot, but we didn't bake a lot of things when I was younger. And so I really started to love baking from scratch. And I found that it was a great outlet for the stressful career that I had. And it changed me completely, baking from scratch. Like it changed something. I've read about this since then about if you're feeling stressed and burnt out and you take up a creative activity, it can really build different neurons in your brain and help you overcome stress. And honestly, it did it for me. Like I was having all these symptoms where I was like almost to this level of having a heart attack and constantly having pain in my chest. And I started baking, and um, that creativity outlet really helped me overcome the stress that I was having on a daily basis from my job. And it also opened up this whole passion for me of baking from scratch. And since I was raised farm to table, I'm like, well, let's implement farm to table methods, but do it from a baking perspective. And we would, for instance, that means to me, like in the fall, you bake apple pies and pumpkin cookies, and we really started to bake seasonally. And I actually ended up opening a farm to table bakery in my community because there wasn't one, and I was passionate about it. And so it was, my sister and I decided to get together. She was in the food world. And so for her, that was a passion as well. And we opened up this bakery. We ran it for a decade. And when it was time to close, I was thinking, oh, what should I do now? And I'm so passionate about intentional eating that I decided that would be my next venture. Is I've I know how to cook and how to bake, but um, I really want to bring more awareness to how important it is to be an intentional eater. Um,
So I love all of that. I think
and one of the ways that I got that became important to me. Go ahead, Robin.
that's okay. It froze up.
Oh,
I was just going to say one of the things I hear you saying a lot of amazing things. And I wanted to touch just for a second on the creativity and the intentional portion of all of that. And so for me, creativity in the world I live in, there's primary and secondary foods. And so secondary would be all the food on your plate. And then primary is everything off your plate that feeds you. And creativity is such a large piece of that. And when that is not in play in your life, that does, like you said, it does help with stress relief. It does help with creativity. It does with the neurons in your brain. It does all of those things. But people get really frightened of the word creativity because they're like, well, I'm not creative. I don't paint. But creativity is so much more than that. And baking is one of those things. Cooking is one of those things. Doodling. I mean, there's just so many different ways to be creative, like how you organize your home can be creative. So I think people need to kind of broaden their vision of what the word creativity means and means to you as an individual and run with that. And don't worry if it's not matched up to, being the grand painter or, something like that. So I love that you recognized that having that passion and putting that into place was really good for your health and wellness. So that's really cool. And then the intentional part I want you to speak on, because I think in this day and age, we run through life at such a fast pace and we're not intentional about many things, but especially about food. We're running through drive-throughs. We're packing on, the processed foods because it's convenient. We're doing things out of convenience and being uneducated in that whole field, that I want to kind of hit on what intentional eating is. I know you said you created something, so if you could speak to that a little bit, I think that would be beneficial for the audience.
Sure. So when I decided to start baking, um, it was a creative outlet for me, but it didn't make me an intentional eater.
Sure.
In fact, I did not become an intentional eater till a number of years later. I I both of my children, I have 3 kids, and 2 of them were having a lot of stomach issues. And my daughter got diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder in somewhere in that time. And then I myself, I got COVID in the pandemic, and I had long COVID, and a very bad case of long COVID where it was hard to get out of bed. When I did get out of bed, I had vertigo. I developed high blood pressure. And there came a point in time where I'm like, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to be dependent on the pills that the doctor has given me. I feel like I'm too young to be this sick. And I don't want my kids to have to live like this either because they're in pain every day.
Mhm.
And my older son kept saying to me, Mom, you have to stop eating this. You have to start eating this. And I'm not sure, like he was just really interested in food and ingredients. And I realized that ingredients had been so important for me because I talked about the farm to table lifestyle that I was developing. But for some reason, I never thought about the ingredients in the everyday things that we were eating. And when he started to talk about things like, seed oils being unhealthy, and at first I was like, I didn't grow up like with that thought. It's very foreign to me. I don't know what he's talking about, but he's my son and I want to respect him by listening to him. And so I started to listen to him, and then I love to research. Comes from like my long career, and that's what, as a litigator, we do a lot of research. And I started to research these things, and I realized that the things he was saying was correct, and that I wasn't an intentional eater because I had a pantry full of high fructose corn syrup and ingredients I couldn't pronounce.
Right.
And it did not flow with the farm to table lifestyle that I was trying to create. And so when I realized that and I put it all together, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get rid of all of these bad ingredients because who knows, like it could be affecting our health. I read that it is. Let's see if it's true. So I got rid of everything. I got rid of anything in our pantry, in our refrigerator, in our freezer, anything that um, contained what I had thought was a bad ingredient. And once I did that, I started to notice that we became healthier. I reversed most all of the symptoms I was having from long COVID. My daughter's autoimmune symptoms eased up. My son's stomach problems began to go away. And I noticed that it was directly related to what we were eating. And once I noticed that for us, I became so passionate about trying to help other people become more aware that these health problems that are typical in America, perhaps some of them can be prevented simply by changing what we eat. And that's what happened. That's our story for how we became intentional eaters.
I love that. And it like gives me chills because I think so many of us have these situations that arise with health issues with ourselves, our kids. And before you become intentional, you're just sort of trying to suppress the symptoms and trying to do that with whatever your doctor says, because that's the one who you trust. And I'm not discounting medication because it always has, it does have a time and a place. But what is missed in that whole conversation is everything that you're doing on a daily basis and what you do consume. And I mean, I don't know your son, but congratulations to him for being a younger person and doing deep dives and figuring out, and he must be like you in the research department, but getting that information and not just kind of hearing it and not hearing it, but actually sharing it with you. And it's interesting because I think in all aspects of life, we can't do everything all at one time. So your journey just, it took you to from farm to table, out of farm to table, back to the, bakery side of things. And again, it's when your eyes are opened up, that little tiny thing your son said changed your entire trajectory of where you're going in your life. And so I think that happens for a lot of us when our kids suffer, when our kids say something, when someone else says something, and we get curious and we start the research process for ourselves and start to really educate ourselves. That's when I think all the light bulbs start going off. And it is correct. Processed foods, my first encounter with high fructose corn syrup and partially hydrogenated was when we had our first daughter and she was 1, and I belonged to a gym, and they were like, oh, take 2 health classes and you get a free spa treatment. I was like, sign me up. Like, I never get a day out. I need a day out. Right. And I was forever transformed sitting in that class. Like, that guy started talking about like what those 2 things were. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to get home and check on my food. Like, I've got this 1-year-old and what are we doing to her? And I mean, literally I went home, my husband's like, what are you doing? And I go, we've got to check all these boxes and we've got to look and that was just the tip of the iceberg, because those are just 2 ingredients out of a bazillion that are really not healthy for us. But when we went through and we pulled everything out, I'm like, we have nothing to eat. Like, what in the world? Like, so that was kind of my first like awakening. But again, I still was doing mac and cheese. I was still doing, because it's like I took some of the stuff, but again, you can only take in so much information and just so much at a time. But the seed oils, it's huge. It's inflammatory. It makes inflammation. For some, dairy and wheat, those are people's triggers, right? So it's finding what are your triggers, but some things are just foundational. Like seed oils are just foundational. It's going to disturb everybody's body because of the way it's actually made. So if you don't know about seed oils, it's like cotton oil. Anyways, whatever they are, I always just go to, these are what you should ingest, which is coconut oil, ghee, avocado oil, and we'll do grass-fed butter. But other than that, all the rest to me they're not really great oils because they come from some type of a chemically processed type of method, I guess, to make it. And also when I did learn, when you're buying like olive oil or any oils, you want to look at where they're from. And if they're multi-sourced, so if on the back it says it's from 5 different countries, I wouldn't say that would be the highest quality, because a lot of times that's just leftovers thrown together. Whereas if you just get it from one particular, it's organic, obviously, but one particular country, usually the quality is higher. That's what I found in my research and looking at some PubMed articles and things like that. So I try to go to good resources to find things when I'm researching. So with intentional eating, a lot of people really don't know what that is, aside from maybe looking at ingredients. But again, ingredients are super important. My rule of thumb is 9 or less ingredients typically, but mostly if you can't pronounce it, like you said. And the other question is, could I put that ingredient in my cupboard, or could I put that in my refrigerator? Is it something I would have in my house? And if it's not, then you know that it's chemically made in some laboratory, really. So those are, natural flavors. Sugar comes in a lot of different names. So, recognizing all the different names or just things that you can't pronounce would be like a first way to start. But as far as intentional eating goes, speak a little bit about what that means to you and how you apply that like to your everyday.
Well, I think that the first step is that you need to become more mindful about what you're putting in your mouth. And that's going to be different to all of us. The reason is because there's 8 billion people in this world. We can't all be the same. We don't all have the same background. We don't all have the same mindset. We don't all have the same food available to us. So we have to really decide, what it means to each of us, how we want it to look like our journey with food. And it's also going to be, why are we being an intentional eater? For me, it was my health. I wanted to reverse symptoms that we had and prevent any further problems. Like, I want to live till an old age. I want to enjoy the rest of my life. I want to be healthy while I do it. I don't want to be stuck taking a lot of pills. And I don't feel like in America, that we are being counseled, to prevent disease. I think that we are being, we are given pills and remedies when we're sick. And I don't want that to happen. I want to prevent disease before it starts. And I do believe it's all surrounding what we eat, because in America, we eat a standard American diet. And that standard American diet is full of processed foods and unhealthy lab created ingredients. And that is causing a lot of obesity, heart disease, cancer, so many fatty liver disease, so many different things. I mean, one of our, I didn't mention, but my son, he was pre-diabetic, and he was, early 20s. And I couldn't figure out why is my son pre-diabetic? Like, I cook for him every night. He eats what I consider to be healthy. And it was because in our food, we have so much sugar, that's hidden sugars.
Mhm.
And he was, like, he'd have a cookie at lunch, and then he'd have a cookie at dinner. And I'm thinking, oh, well, it's just a cookie. But by the time he had the first cookie with maybe like a Gatorade, he'd already had way too much sugar for the day. And, these are the type of things that we're not teaching kids. Like, we're not making them cognizant of intentional eating. And it's surrounding, get back to the question, it's being mindful what you eat and what you want your specific diet to look like. If I hate to say the word diet, because when I say diet, like, people take that to mean like, we're a diet culture. Everyone's got to go on a diet, right? And it's not, intentional eating. You don't need a diet. You're going to be very mindful about what you're putting into your mouth, where it came from, how it was made, what it's going to do for you. Not, I'm just going to sit here with a bag of chips and eat mindlessly because, I just want to enjoy myself. It's like, what are you trying to achieve with what you're eating? And that's the important part of being an intentional eater. It's like not just mindlessly consuming food, it's being mindful about where it came from, how it is made, and what you hope to achieve with what you're eating. Sometimes we just want to enjoy ourselves, and that's great. But sometimes, like, we want to nourish our bodies. And for that, we have to think about what we're eating will nourish us, if that
Yeah,
makes
I think that,
sense.
yeah, no, that all makes a lot of sense. And I think you just said it. The very last thing you said is, how do you want to nourish your body? And I always believe I'm not a dieting, I do not coach people on, which diet to pick. I coach people on how to create your own lifestyle and how to create what works for you, because we are, like you said, all bio individual, and your genetic makeup and your environmental and what's available for you and what you have personally going on in your stress, and all of those factors matter when you're deciding how you're going to eat. And mindlessly eating, I always like to try to relate it to, it's like if you were going on a vacation, you wouldn't just hop on the first plane and, well, let's just see where it lands. And then, and not have kind of a mapping out, because people are like, it's so overwhelming to try to, decide every day what I'm going to eat. And so I'm like, well, when you decide to go on vacation, you can't just like hop on and see where your destination leads you. I guess you could, but you don't know where you're going to end up, and you could end up somewhere where you really don't want to. And that's the same thing kind of with a lifestyle. It's like you could hop on a train of a lifestyle and kind of live it half in and half out, so mindlessly and mindfully, and then you don't know where you're going to end up, right? And so it's like we can control certain things. And so what is in your control are decisions and choices that you make. And yes, we can all enjoy a piece of cake every now and again. And yes, nothing is off the table when you get out of the diet culture mindset. But what happens is, as you continue to add more nutrient dense food into your lifestyle, those things aren't as appealing, but also you learn to create them in a healthier way. So there's lots of swaps. Now, when I first started this journey 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago at this point, there were not a lot of swaps. So it became, how am I going to find time to cook? Like, how am I going to find, I mean, I've got toddlers, I've got, like the time is very limited. So now I tell people all the time, you are very fortunate because there are a lot of good companies doing good things. It's just the upfront research and making sure that the company has your best interest, has nutrient dense food in their ingredient labels. That, when you go into the produce section and you look at a bag of carrots, it doesn't say 20 ingredients on the list. It's like carrots and water or something, along those nature. So the less ingredients, the less processed it is. And so we want to have just a mindset of like an 80-20, 80% unprocessed, 20%, 90-10, something like that, to get, again, that is giving yourself permission to enjoy a little something here or there without the guilt of, oh my gosh, I just did that and I just ate that, so forget it. My whole lifestyle is ruined and now I'm going back to my old ways. And so that's, I hear that a lot because that's what the diet culture has taught us. It's like you're either on the diet or you're off the diet. And it's like, no, we're just doing life. Like, it's my mom's 80th birthday and we had a cake here that, I wasn't going to bake a cake for 20 people or whatever. So I had a little tiny slice of it. It was okay. It wasn't, but like you said, when your kids suffer, so like your son had prediabetes, my daughter, she had candida. She was addicted to sugar and carbs. Like when I say the girl, that's all she wanted in middle school was like carbs. And even if it was healthy, right? I mean, I would pick the healthiest bar and I would try to pick the things that weren't, as horrible, but I'm like, something is wrong. Like this is all she wants, and I thought maybe she had ADD, but basically it came down to she had candida and she just had an overgrowth of bacteria in her gut. And so we all did the candida 28-day cleanse because she had to eliminate to get rid of. She had to eradicate. She had a crush, which was a couple of supplements, and then we had to get it out. And so then we needed to replace it. And if I tell you in 2 weeks, she was a completely different person.
Wow.
Like 2 weeks of getting off processed stuff and having very, very, very minimal sugar, like only berries and green apples. And again, it wasn't forever. We did it for 28 days, but her palate changed. In 28 days, your palate completely changes. But also the cooking we did at home, really, it was during COVID. So it was actually a blessing because we weren't eating out, we weren't doing the things. But when you talk about like consumption of sugar, people have zero clue as to how much sugar they intake in a day. Yeah. And it starts with Starbucks. It starts with the Gatorade. It starts with, your waffles. It's so much. And if people actually I always like to give people a visual of like the amount, showing them like, this is how much, like this bag of sugar right here is what you ingested in 3 days. And then they're like, really? It's like they have because grams doesn't mean anything to somebody, right? It's like how many people get teaspoons, people get tablespoons, people get bags, and so I think that's important for people to be exposed to. And I think kids in general, like in school, we're failing so poorly and badly because we're doing no education. The education is around how do you read your fat, your calories? And it's like, what? Like, no, yes and no. It's like, yes, we can kind of look at that, and we really need to be focused over here on the actual ingredients that matter. So I think it's amazing how you started one place in life and how you've journeyed through so much and how you're over here in this whole different realm. And I can just feel from the conversation how much impact you're going to have in this area because of how passionate you feel about it. And so when something lights us up, when we learn something, we've got to learn to use our voices to help make change, because the more conversations that we can have around simple shifts and swaps and things that people can start to think about, and the more people become intentional about their thought process, the more we're going to change as a society as a whole, and not just your family, not just my family, not just their family. So
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is amazing. I love your podcast. I am going to love your podcast. I love your trailer. But I think that it's important conversations that are going to come out in your podcast. And I know that there is going to be a huge community that wants to listen in, because when you ask people, nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to think about having illness later in life. People want to be, they just don't know what to do. They don't have the steps, and it's super overwhelming when you're first dipping your toe in. Like, you had some prior knowledge, right? You grew up a certain way. Most people are not blessed with growing up in a way like that. And so you were able to just refocus. You had a dip, and then you refocused back to what you knew, and you had a dip, and then you refocused. So a lot of people aren't, coming from that. Still doable, but they just need people like you to kind of simplify it and make it a little bit less kind of overwhelming. What are some of your favorite food swaps? I'm just curious. Do you have particular brands that you like? Do you just do all from scratch now? What is your new kind of lifestyle?
Well, I think it's important that people know that you don't, intentional eating and eating healthier is not about giving things up.
Yes.
Because if people think that they have to give things up, then immediately they set themselves up for failure.
Sure.
And because our taste buds are, have been developed by the food industry, we like things that we like. We don't have time. We crave convenience. And because of this, we think that if someone says to me that to be an intentional eater means eating healthier, I'm not sick right now. I'll worry about it later because I don't want to give anything up. I like my food. And that's not what intentional eating means. Um, Intentional meaning eating means just to start thinking more about what you eat so that you can prevent being sick later on. Because sometimes think it's too late. Like sometimes you can't prevent,
Mhm.
being sick. And sometimes when you become sick, it is too late to do anything about it. So I think number one is that people need to understand they don't have to give things up. I know in this country we love our desserts, and I had a bakery. It was important for me to learn how to make things from scratch with better ingredients so that you could enjoy your baked goods. And so my first swap that I love is to get rid of your box mixes and make your desserts or your favorite bakery items from scratch, because it's a lot more economical along with being healthier. Sometimes people equate eating healthier to mean that they're going to be spending more money, but that's
Mhm.
further from the truth. Because for instance, one of my favorite swaps is pancake mix. If you go to the food aisle and you look at the pancake mix boxes, it contains a lot of ingredients in that pancake mix. But all you have to do is mix together flour, a little bit of sugar, a tiny bit of sugar actually, baking powder, baking soda, and suddenly you have pancake mix, and buying a big bag of flour is so much cheaper than than buying that $3 box of mix.
So it's so
And
interesting. I want to point something out. So interesting that you say that, because that is a pushback that I hear a lot, is like, well, let's just say they're going to make pancakes. And so this brand over here is, $4 for the box. And so, when we talk about a swap, maybe a brand that I know off the top of my head, but that has all clean ingredients, you're talking $7 or $8 for that bag. Now, people are like, well, that's so expensive. But like you're saying, you can spend $5 and make your own pancake mix that's going to be probably twice the size of either one of those bags. And so people don't realize that making your own stuff doesn't have to be this, like you have to be a baker, right? It's flour, right. It's a little bit of sugar, it's a little bit of baking soda, and a little bit, and then you have control over what kind of sugar you're putting in there. Right. And so you're more in control of the actual ingredients, and you're saving money, and you're filling your body with nutrient dense food, and you can feel better about what you're actually eating. So if you're listening to this and you're someone who really isn't a baker or isn't like a from scratch kind of cooker, start with pancake mix, because that's super easy. Start with something really basic, and then you will get better. It's like, I remember when someone was like, make your own baby food. And I was like, what? I'm like, I'm not I'm not a new food person. Like, how am I going to know what to put? And it's like, no, really, it's just the ingredient, a little bit of water, it's like, but unless you grew up in a family like that, that wasn't something that, it seems scary. Right. And then the second kid, I was like, oh, I got this. I'm making all my baby food from scratch, because that is so much more economical, like you said, and it's not hard. So, all right. So we're swapping out ingredients for box stuff. Okay. I like that.
Yep. And then, another thing, easy thing, to cook at home is your own granola. I am shocked at the ingredient list of some of the granolas and just how much sugar they contain when there's so many other healthier options. So I started making all my granola from scratch. First of all, I use a glyphosate-free oats, and that is so important to me because I am uh, I I feel like there should be a lot more information on glyphosate. It's an herbicide. It's applied to crops such as oats, especially, and corn. And here I am. I grew up in the Midwest. I live in the Midwest. And unfortunately, the farmers here use a lot of glyphosate on their corn. And there are a lot of studies that show that glyphosate remains on whatever it's applied to, um, even after the food is processed and you get it in your possession. And so oats are one of the things that I only buy glyphosate-free oats. And I use oats and honey and some nuts and some dried fruit. And all you have to do is mix that up, a little bit of coconut oil, and you have your bake that, and you have your own granola. It's so simple. It's much more economical. I'm shocked at the price of a bag of granola at the store. And it's so much healthier. You do not have to. I have helped, when I had the bakery, I helped a lot of people learn how to bake. And one of the things that stops people is they feel like they don't have the skill to bake, and they don't even want to start. And I always found it very joyful that when you start to teach people that you don't have to have a lot of skill, like what you need to do is you need to want to do it, and then you need to keep practicing. It's like when we learn how to ride a bike, we're scared to learn how to ride a bike. We get on the bike, we keep falling off, keep falling off, keep falling off, but we don't stop. We keep getting on the bike. And that's the same thing when you learn how to cook and when you learn how to bake. It's practice. It's right. Nobody just comes out of the womb knowing how to cook and bake. It's like it's practice. It's like if our parents and grandparents didn't cook and bake, then we never saw that. We were never exposed to it. So it's practice for us. If we grew up in that life, we're comfortable with it. But if we didn't, we're uncomfortable because we don't know how to do it. And that means that you need to do it more. You need to get inside your own kitchen. Nobody's watching you. Put your granola together, and you're going to be amazed at how great it tastes and how simple it is to do something like that. So that would be my second swap, is to make your own granola that you can use on yogurt. You can use it on cereal with maybe a little oat milk or almond milk. over it in the morning. It's a much healthier cereal because they are putting way too many unhealthy sugars in the cereals that we're feeding our families. And we can take control back by just simply making our own.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so glad you brought up the whole glyphosate discussion because it is not talked about enough, like you said, and it's very it needs to be. And one of the things, again, I get a lot of people in the community like, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And I'm just like you, it's got to be glyphosate free. And I'm trying to think, the brand that I use is like I think it's called Farmers One or One Farmers, something like that. And it will say on the bag, it will say glyphosate free. If it doesn't, then it's not. Whether it's organic, whether it's steel cut oats, doesn't matter. If it only just says 2 ingredients, if it doesn't say glyphosate free, it's not. So you want organic glyphosate free if possible. That would be your healthiest choice. And it's really not that much more expensive. And I love even just your conversation of how to make granola. It's like 5 simple things. There's no kind of recipe to it. You're just throwing stuff together. So my thing for baking is when I cook, I just kind of cook off the cuff. I don't really measure unless, it's like a dressing or something, but I just don't like to because I don't know why. Just never kind of grew up. My mom really didn't measure a lot. She was always just kind of throwing stuff. So when baking, it's a little bit harder. You can't just throw a lot of stuff, but granola totally can do that. So if you're scared of baking, if you're scared of cooking, if you've not been educated and done that in a long time or ever, granola is great to try because it is so simple. And her analogy of the bike riding, I love because I think it's so true. And what I wanted to say about that was that when you first learn to ride, you're just pedaling, right? And you do fall and you pedal, but then when you get good at it, you start jumping and you like pop a wheelie and you do. So it's like, you're not going to go from waking up to making an egg to then making souffle. You're going to you might not ever get to souffle, right? I never could learn to pop a wheelie, it's like, but I still was able to cook and I was still able to ride my bike, so again, whatever you want and you desire, like you said, it's your want. That's what's going to produce what it is that you get on the other side. All right. I love those. Those 2 are super simple, and they're not overwhelming, and they seem easy to do. So anything else that comes to mind?
Condiments. Condiments, my family loves their condiments. And when I started to look at our condiments and what is in them, I was shocked at the amount of sugar we were consuming just from ketchup and pickle relish and mustard. And so I swapped out all of our condiments. It's not always possible to make your own things. I know that I follow a bunch of people and they're always like, "Oh, you can easily make your own ketchup or your own mustard, your own mayonnaise." And I'm like, I don't have a lot of time to do that. My kids don't have a lot of time to do that, but I want them to be conscious about what they're eating. So I've discovered organic versions that are healthier that don't have all of the added sugars. For instance, let's say that you are a Heinz ketchup person. Did you know that Heinz makes an simple Heinz? I think it's called Simple Organic or something like that, where it's all organic and it doesn't have any high fructose corn syrup in it. But the regular ketchup sold right next to it has high fructose corn syrup. So you can simply opt for the one that doesn't have it, and it's a healthier version. Same thing with pickle relish. If you looked at the pickle relish, they all have high fructose corn syrup in them. If you spend a little bit of time, because I am that person in the grocery store, I'm looking at all the labels. If you spend a little bit of time, you can find the pickle relish that does not contain high fructose corn syrup. They have 2 different varieties at the store that's nearest me, and those are the ones that I purchase. In the fall, you can often find pickle relish being made by at a local farm stand because the fall is when a lot of farmers will do and people, just regular people, they do a lot of canning in the fall and they make their own pickles and they make their own pickle relish. I just made a great one with zucchini. I made zucchini relish this year, and you get to control like the ingredients that you put into it. And people do not have, like, general people, they don't have high fructose corn syrup in their kitchens. Like, they don't
Right.
sell
It's
that.
not something, right.
You know,
Exactly.
they don't sell that to us. They don't, so if you're getting something that's homemade or locally made by a local farmer or local, let's say you go to your your local farm stand, they will have a healthier version of pickle relish for you rather than what you might find that's been highly processed in the store. So definitely pay attention to the condiments that you have. Even mayonnaise, like you can find a mayonnaise. I think Primal Kitchen makes one with avocado oil instead
Mhm.
of the seed oils, and that's going to be a little bit healthier for you than just the highly processed things from the big food makers.
Correct. Yeah. I like those. Those are three simple things that people can walk away with today to start investigating and looking at what they have in their homes, and then, you know, start experimenting, go on a detective journey, go to the grocery store, take a look. One of the things I wanted to say, that also goes along with ingredients is food dyes. Those are something that you should really look at your labels. And if there's a lot of food dyes, we don't do any food dyes in our house at this point, because it leads to produces in one of my daughters like more of a hyperactive reaction. I call it the Tasmanian devil comes out, because red dye just does something to, her chemicals in her brain and gut or whatever. I don't know exactly, but so that was something that we learned early on. But now, again, when you find out something, you start swapping, and then so now I really don't think we have anything any longer. Again, it wasn't an overnight thing, but I'm very conscious about trying not to have any food dyes. Again, on occasion, sweet treat, something like we go to a birthday party, we go somewhere and it has it. We're not going to get crazy and be like, no, but we just try to avoid it as much as possible, because my outcome, like you're saying, like, what do you want your outcome to be? My outcome is I want to live till I'm older. I want to live a healthy lifestyle, and I want to, not I want to prevent disease as much as I have in my control. And
Yeah.
and I've seen how, like you said, I've seen how just doing simple, not just food swaps, but food is definitely a huge part of it, but also mindset, lifestyle, swapping all those things so that you're more content, and you're not living in a high stress, fight or flight all the time. You're able to like live more in that parasympathetic rest and digest state, so that your body can work efficiently. So I think when you combine both of sides together in a more balanced fashion, you have a better chance of avoiding disease, because a disease doesn't just pop. It's not like you wake up one day and just have a disease. It's just not how it works. So if you're someone who hasn't ever been diagnosed with anything, good for you. And let's start the prevention now, so that we can, hopefully dodge all of that. If you're someone that has had something pop up like an autoimmune condition, there you might not be able to quote unquote cure it, but you can definitely change your lifestyle, food, and things off your plate to put that into remission and to keep it there. And a lot of that is just figuring out what works for your body to bring the inflammation down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the food color because that is so important. There are studies linking red 40 to cancer.
Yep.
And if you start to like, they put that in things that they don't need to put that in. Like,
Nope.
why does the thing sitting, why does pickle relish need,
Yellow.
yellow number 5 or yellow number
I don't
6
know.
or red number 40? It's like, you don't need that type of stuff in it is in everything.
And don't be fooled, because just because something is white doesn't mean that it doesn't have red, blue, and yellow in it.
Oh,
Flip it
right.
over and look at your ingredients. Because my daughter's like, well, I didn't know that had red dye in it. And I was like, well, did you look at the ingredients? She's like, well, no, but it's white. I'm like, okay, but flip it over. What does it say? I don't know. I don't have ingredients memorized, but I'm just suspicious, and I feel like it might be. And then she's like, well, how is that possible?
Yeah.
And I'm like, girl, I don't know. I don't know. That's what I don't know. But what I do know is that's trickery, and we're not eating it.
Yeah, because when they process things so highly, sometimes it strips the color out, and they want it to be appealing to you when you buy it. So they put color back into it in order to make it appealing to you, and that includes things that are white. You are right about that.
Funny. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's like a big scheme and scam to see like how much, stuff they can get by you. And that's why I think these conversations are super important to have, and for people to listen in on conversations like this, because my hope and desire is that every day that someone listens to one of my episodes, they're able to walk away with something that they can start applying to their everyday life that's going to help them take the next step on their health and wellness journey. So before we end, I wanted to ask, which I ask all my guests, for you in particular, where you are currently in your life, what are 3 non-negotiables you've created around your days that you implement, obviously because it's a non-negotiable, that makes you feel your best, and allows you to live your healthiest?
First of all is I drink a lot of water. I don't actually drink anything but water, coffee, and I might have, if we're socializing, I might have a cocktail, but I don't drink sweetened beverages like, sweetened waters or a lot of juices or things like that. So I mainly stick with water, and I like water. I know some people don't like water, but I like water. I do not ever drink any sodas at all. Um, so that is my number one. Number two is I usually don't eat meat before dinner time. And the reason is because it helps me to eat more fruits and vegetables. And I feel that is important. My family, I know there are a lot of people, like I said at the beginning of this, you have to decide what your journey is going to look for you, and some people advocate not to eat any meat, and some people advocate to only eat meat. And for us, we do eat meat, but we eat meat that is from a regenerative farmer and is all grass-fed meat. And for me, I typically do not do that until dinner time. So, throughout the day, I'm eating um fruits and vegetables, and I make all of our own. I make sourdough bread, so I make all of our bread. And that's just what I decided my journey was going to look like, and that is something that really works for me. And then the third thing is there are foods that I've decided that I will only eat organic. Um, this is not to criticize any other type of food, because I know people, like, it inhibits them becoming an intentional eater because they say they can't afford organic food. There are some foods that are organic that are actually cheaper than non-organic. For instance, I go to Costco, I buy the big bag of glyphosate-free oats. It's $9. It's cheaper than Quaker Oats because it's like a 5-pound bag. By the time you add up those boxes of Quaker Oats, they're actually more expensive than my glyphosate-free oats. So there are just things that I've decided for myself that I will only eat organic. And typically for those things, they're GMO grains, and I won't eat them. I will only eat organic versions of anything made with corn or oats, wheat, soy, the things that are sprayed most with glyphosate. And I will look at the EWG's Dirty Dozen list, and for fruits and vegetables that have the most pesticides on them. Some of those things include apples and strawberries. I only buy organic apples and strawberries, and you can actually find very good deals if you are by a Costco. They do. Oh, I've noticed over the last 2 years they have been introducing more and more organic food, and that bag of apples at Costco that's organic is actually cheaper than the one at my local
Grocery.
uh, grocery store. So, just to say that uh, you can afford to eat more healthy if you actually put a little research into it and find where you can find the healthy food at.
I love that. And I love those are great non-negotiables. And I love that you speak to it on a bio-individual lens perspective, because again, what works for you might not work for someone else. And these are just different ideas. And I love to ask people's non-negotiables, because I feel like we're all looking to build and sustain our own lifestyles. And so just hearing what other people do, it resonates with some, and it might be something they never thought of before. And so that's why I love that question, because it just gives a little bit of more insight as to what works for somebody. So then if someone's interested, they might be able to just try it out to see. And I am, as with you, the organic, there are certain fruits and vegetables, which are mostly the dirty dozen, but I also want to encourage people to check out their local farmers, to check out their CSAs, to check out people that are having less of an blue, or what do they call that? Like a footprint, because the food's not traveling as far. And so also with local farmers, you can have conversations with them. What is your farming practice? How do you do things? What are you spraying? What are you not spraying? And most of the small farmers do it right. Most, but you've got to have that conversation, and you build trust with them, and anyways, so we can get into a whole nother topic on that. But I think for today, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think we've given people a lot to think about. So if you're not an intentional eater, that might be something new to you that you might want to start applying to your life. And then, of course, I can't wait to hear who makes pancake mix, granola mix, and some of their own condiments. So if that is you and you're doing one of those things, obviously drop it on my social media page, or DM me, or put it in the podcast notes, or like little comments or whatever, because this is what lights me up. I like to see people making changes, and I like to see how it's working for them. And I think other people, again, can learn from other people. And the more that we're all doing things and putting it out there, the better ripple effect we're going to create. So thank you, Michelle, so much for coming on. Thank you for all your knowledge. And I really can't wait to listen to your podcast, because I know you're going to have some fabulous conversations. Until next time, everyone, I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Robin.
There's so many good takeaways, but just a few that stood out to me. Number one was a creative outlet. Discovering a passion for Michelle in baking from scratch was how she reduced her stress, which demonstrated the power of creative activities in building new neural pathways and overcoming stress. Intentional eating for health. Adopting intentional eating habits, which focuses on whole, natural ingredients and eliminating processed foods, can significantly impact your health. Be aware of the harmful additives like glyphosate that we talked about, food dyes, because it will really help us to make more informed decisions when we're choosing our food intentionally. 3, personalized approach to nutrition, recognizing that everybody's bio-individual. And so what works for one might not work for somebody else. And the reasons that go behind that are factors like genetics, environment, stress levels, relationships, all things that you have going on. The other person next to you might have different things going on. So what works for you, again, doesn't always work for somebody else. Number 4, educating others. If you learn something, if you find a healthier swap, if you learn about an ingredient that is not healthy for us, please share it with other people, because people don't have time to sit and research everything, nor do they have the desire. But if someone that is close, that they trust, tells them about something that is harmful that you can swap out, they are going to listen. And that's how we're going to make big change. And number 5, simple swaps and homemade alternatives, making small changes such as preparing condiments at home, pancake mix, like she said, granola mix, and choosing organic versions without harmful additives can lead to healthier habits. And so again, these swaps not only are healthier, but she did tell us and prove to us that it can be more economical. So I am actually in the show notes going to drop the granola recipe, which really isn't a recipe, it's just ingredients. And also I will drop a pancake recipe with more definitive measurements, so that you guys can try those out and see how they work for you. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Again, if you're looking for a supportive group of women who want to have further discussions on these topics, please join my podcast, Facebook podcast, private Facebook group. I'll put the link in the show notes also, and as well as a few other things. So stay tuned for the next episode. Until then, I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in today. I loved being here with you. I hope that you got something from today's episode. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. Drop a comment below, and if you feel led to, download the episode and share it with someone you love that needs to hear this message. As we continue to spread the goodness of this podcast, I'd love for you to help us by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or a rate on Spotify. As we increase listeners, we will come up more often when women are searching for podcasts to listen to. To stay connected with me, you can check out my social media pages at Live Life Balanced with Robin. You can check out my website at livelifebalancedwithrobin.com. You can book a discovery call. And if you're looking for a way to get started right now, you can opt in for my new quick guide for the empty nester refresh. You can join my wait list for my new course, It's Your Time, which is going to be launching soon, which I'm super excited about. And as always, thank you for letting me be part of your day. It truly means a lot that you're allowing me to be on your wellness journey with you. Until next time, find peace, love, and light by breathing, being present, and allowing for all possibilities to happen.